But you know why? Because I love what I do.
Okay.
She wrote the songs that made the world fall in love, yet somehow the world forgot her name. Valerie Simpson, a powerhouse behind some of the most timeless hits in soul and R&B, from Ain't No Mountain High Enough to Solid. Her fingerprints are everywhere, man. But while others took the spotlight, Valerie was the heartbeat, the quiet force that made it all happen. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, she was real. Her story is one of genius, love, loss, and the price of staying true to yourself in an industry that doesn't always play fair. How does someone this gifted stay underrated for so long? Well, that's what we're diving into today. Let's get into her story right now. Let me know where you're watching this from in the comments. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of water or tea, sit back, and let's start this journey together. Valerie Simpson was born in the Bronx, New York, in August 1946, a time when the city pulsed with music from every window, every corner store, every Sunday church. You could hear gospel choirs blending with street doo-wop, and that mix of sacred and street was the sound that raised her. Valerie came from a modest family, not poor in spirit but short on material things. Her parents worked hard, trying to keep food on the table, while little Valerie spent her hours humming melodies, tapping rhythms on furniture, turning noise into music before she even knew what songwriting was. She grew up in a household where faith and music went hand in hand. Church wasn't just a ritual, it was a concert every week. Valerie learned early that music could lift people up, make them cry, make them hope again. She joined the church choir, and that's where everyone first heard that tone, rich, warm, full of something deeper than technique. You could feel her voice, one of her childhood friends said. It wasn't about showing off, it was about feeling. In the late 1950s, New York was a breeding ground for young black talent. Harlem was alive with energy, and just a train ride away from the Bronx stood the Apollo Theater, the dream stage for every kid who believed their voice could change their life. Valerie soaked all that in. The gospel harmonies from church mixed with the soul coming from jukeboxes, and something started forming inside her, that instinct to tell stories through song. By the time she hit her late teens, Valerie wasn't just singing anymore. She was writing. She found herself drawn to the piano not because someone told her to learn it, but because it became the place where her emotions made sense. Every heartbreak, every dream, every Sunday sermon, she put it into chords. Her earliest songs weren't meant for fame. They were private conversations with her own soul. Then one day, fate walked in wearing a fedora and a grin. Nick Ashford. He was a young songwriter from South Carolina trying to find his place in New York's chaotic music scene. They met through a mutual church connection, and from that moment, something clicked. Valerie was reserved, grounded. Nick was ambitious, poetic. Together, they were lightning and thunder. In those early years, the two weren't famous, not even close. They were broke, hustling, dreaming. They'd spend days writing and nights, hoping someone would listen. There's a story that they were so poor they shared a sandwich between them, but they didn't care because they believed in their songs. "We didn't have money," Valerie once said, "but we had a sound." That sound came from a place of faith and fire. Valerie's musical discipline, honed in church, met Nick's lyrical imagination. She would sit at the piano, playing chords that felt like heartbeats, while Nick scribbled down lines about love that could move mountains. Literally. Out of those sessions came the kind of songwriting chemistry that defined a generation. But before Motown, before the fame, before Ain't No Mountain High Enough, they were just two dreamers writing in a tiny apartment with a secondhand piano and big hopes. Valerie's voice, smooth but strong, began to stand out in demos they recorded for other artists. Her phrasing carried that same sincerity she learned in gospel halls. She wasn't trying to be flashy or commercial, she was trying to be honest. And honesty became her weapon. Valerie's early work caught the attention of local musicians who saw something pure in her. In a world already dominated by male producers and songwriters, here was a young black woman not only singing but composing, arranging, and guiding the sound. She didn't demand space, she earned it with talent. What many don't realize is that before Valerie and Nick became icons, they faced countless rejections. Record executives told them their songs were too emotional, too wordy, too soulful, but they refused to water it down. Valerie said later, "We wanted to write songs that spoke to the spirit, not just the charts." That mindset would define her career, the belief that truth lasts longer than trends. So by the early 1960s, Valerie Simpson had already laid the foundation for everything that came next. She had her roots in gospel, her heart in soul, and her partner in music and in life right beside her. She wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing purpose. And the world? It was about to hear something it would never forget. By the early 1960s, Valerie Simpson and Nick Ashford were starting to make some real noise, not on stage, but behind the scenes. They had been grinding for years, writing songs in cramped New York apartments, knocking on record label doors, and living off pure faith and melody. Finally, opportunity came knocking back. Motown Records, the dream factory of soul, noticed them. Man, for two hungry songwriters like Valerie and Nick, that was like being called up to the major leagues. At first, they weren't writing for themselves. Nah, they were crafting songs for others, and what songs they were. Their first big break came when Ray Charles recorded Let's Go Get Stoned, a funky, gospel-infused anthem that went straight to the top of the R&B charts in 1966. Imagine that. A song written by two broke dreamers became a hit for one of the greatest artists alive. That moment changed everything. Valerie and Nick had found their formula, not something calculated, but something honest. Their writing was built on emotion, real conversation, and faith. Valerie would sit at the piano, laying down those heavenly chords, and Nick would spin out lyrics that felt like poetry. Together, they wrote Love the Way It Feels, not the way it looks on paper. Soon, Motown wanted more. The duo moved to Detroit, and that's where their real legacy began. They became the heartbeat behind Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell's magic. Valerie and Nick wrote Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Your Precious Love, You're All I Need to Get By, songs that didn't just sell records. They defined what love sounded like in the 1960s soul era. Valerie wasn't just writing, though she was producing, arranging, and sometimes even singing the guide vocals for Tammy in the studio. People say if you listen closely to the early demos, you can still hear Valerie's voice in the background, soft but powerful, carrying that same warmth she had since her church days. The chemistry between Valerie and Nick was electric, both musically and personally. They weren't just partners in art, they were falling in love, man. You could hear it in every line they wrote. When Nick wrote about devotion, Valerie played it like a heartbeat. When Valerie wrote a melody about longing, Nick sang it with truth. Their music became a reflection of who they were, two souls intertwined, making something bigger than themselves. But it wasn't all glitz and glamour. They were still outsiders in a label full of stars. While Diana Ross, Smokey Robinson, and Stevie Wonder got the limelight, Valerie and Nick were behind the curtain, the secret architects of the Motown sound. They didn't mind, though. We wanted to build something that would outlive us, Valerie later said. And that's exactly what they did. By the end of the decade, Ashford and Simpson weren't just songwriters anymore, they were a force. Every major artist wanted that Ashford and Simpson touch. And slowly, quietly, Valerie Simpson was becoming one of the most powerful women in soul music, though the world didn't quite realize it yet. She was the melody behind the message, the calm in the storm, the woman who turned emotion into sound. And her journey? Oh, it was just getting started. So here's the thing about Valerie Simpson, man. She wasn't just a songwriter. She was an architect of feeling. Every note she played had intention. Every chord carried emotion. While Nick Ashford brought that poetic fire, Valerie grounded it with structure, balance, and soul. Their songs weren't just melodies, they were experiences. And if you ever wondered why their music hit so deep, that's Valerie's fingerprint all over it. She had this gift sitting at the piano, eyes half closed, humming softly before her fingers even touched the keys. Ain't No Mountain High Enough? That came from her playing around with gospel-style progressions. She once said, "We wrote it like a prayer." And when you think about it, that song really is a prayer about faith, love, and not giving up on somebody. That's pure Valerie right there. While most people saw Ashford and Simpson as a team, Valerie was quietly shaping the sound of an era. She arranged harmonies, directed studio sessions, and even taught singers how to feel the words, not just sing them. She'd say things like, "Don't just hit the note, live it." That's the kind of soul teacher she was. Inside the Motown studios, she was one of the few women calling shots, but she didn't need to shout to be heard. Musicians respected her because she knew. She knew how to make a song breathe, how to make the piano talk, how to make a chorus feel like sunlight breaking through clouds. When Valerie was behind the keys, the room changed. But here's the crazy part: while her voice guided so many others, her own singing often got overlooked. Valerie had this honeyed tone, soft but commanding. It wasn't showy like Aretha or Diana, but it carried warmth, the kind that makes you close your eyes and just feel. When she sang backup or demo versions, producers would sometimes keep her vocals because nobody else could match that emotion. She didn't complain. For Valerie, the song always came first. Still, there was something bittersweet about it all. Her talent was undeniable, but the spotlight wasn't shining on her. She was the foundation, but foundations don't get applause. Nick was the public voice. The face Valerie was the soul. Together they built a kingdom of sound, but she was the quiet queen behind it. In interviews years later, Valerie laughed about it. People knew the songs, she said, but not always who wrote them. And that's okay. The music found its way. That's humility and strength. Through the late 1960, their catalog grew like wildfire. Every new single had that same signature, the blend of hope and heartbreak, of heaven and human pain. That's what made it timeless. And while the rest of the world was dancing, Valerie was already thinking ahead, already writing the next chapter. Because for her, music wasn't about fame, it was about truth. And truth, man, never goes out of style. By the early 1970s, Valerie Simpson and Nick Ashford had become more than just behind-the-scenes hitmakers. They were ready to step into the spotlight themselves. After years of writing for legends, they decided it was time to sing their own truth. Motown had given them the platform, but now they wanted ownership of their voice. So they packed up, left Detroit, and built something brand new: Ashford and Simpson, the duo. Their early albums didn't blow up overnight, but man, you could feel the shift. This was different. Valerie wasn't just sitting behind the piano anymore, she was front and center, commanding the mic with that silky, soulful tone. When she and Nick sang together, it was pure chemistry, two hearts beating in perfect rhythm. You could see it in their eyes. You could feel it in every lyric. Their breakthrough came in the mid-1970s, when songs like Send It, Don't Cost You Nothing, and Found a Cure started lighting up the R&B charts. These weren't just love songs, they were affirmations, filled with messages about commitment, unity, and perseverance. And Valerie? She wasn't just singing love, she was living it. Her relationship with Nick became the embodiment of their music. They weren't faking that energy, it was real. By the time Is It Still Good to Ya dropped in 1978, Ashford and Simpson had become a symbol of what lasting love and partnership looked like in the industry. Their performances were electric: Valerie on piano, Nick dancing, the two of them exchanging glances that told whole stories. People didn't just watch them, they believed them. Then came Solid in 1984, their biggest crossover hit, and man, it was everywhere. That groove, that hook, solid as a rock, it became an anthem for love that survives everything. You couldn't walk through a party, a wedding, or a radio dial without hearing it. For once, Valerie and Nick weren't just the songwriters, they were the stars. But behind all the success, Valerie kept her humility. She still rehearsed like she was in that Bronx church choir, still obsessed with getting the harmonies right, still chasing feeling over fame. She once said, "When you sing from love, people feel it even if they don't know your name." That's what made her special. She wasn't chasing the spotlight, she was creating light. In a decade filled with noise and glitter, Valerie Simpson stood out for being real, for keeping soul music grounded in truth. The girl from the Bronx had done it. She'd gone from the piano in a church basement to center stage, shining on her own terms. Success. Man, it can be a tricky thing. When Ashford and Simpson hit it big with Solid, the industry started calling. Everybody wanted them to go bigger, glossier, more mainstream. Labels were saying, "You gotta sound like this new pop wave." But Valerie wasn't having it. She knew who she was. She knew what real music felt like, and she wasn't about to trade soul for shine. Valerie and Nick had built their whole career on authenticity, writing from love, from faith, from truth. But by the mid-1980s, the sound of R&B was shifting. Synths were replacing live instruments, and image was becoming more important than message. While other acts reinvented themselves for MTV, Valerie kept the band tight, the harmonies honest, and the music rooted in groove. That choice? It came with a price. Commercially, things slowed down. The radio wasn't spinning them like before. Younger audiences were chasing new trends, and the industry started to treat them like old school. But Valerie didn't flinch. "Trends come and go," she once said, "but emotion doesn't expire." That was her mantra, and she lived it. Behind the scenes, she was also dealing with another battle, being a woman in an industry that still didn't give women full credit for production. Valerie had been co-producing since the early Motown days, but her name wasn't always printed next to the big titles. She wasn't loud about it. She let her work speak. But that quiet strength was radical. In a male-dominated world, she stood her ground without ever losing grace. And here's what's wild: even when they weren't topping charts, other artists still came to them for that magic. Chaka Khan, Diana Ross, Gladys Knight, Whitney Houston, they all wanted that Ashford and Simpson touch. Valerie's piano still guided sessions, her voice still coached singers, her songs still carried messages that resonated beyond fame. The irony? While many chart toppers from that era faded, Valerie's music stayed relevant, because she never chased the moment, she captured the human heart. Her sound didn't age, it matured. People sometimes asked her, "Don't you wish you were more famous?" And Valerie would just smile and say, "Fame fades, songs don't." That's the kind of wisdom that only comes from walking through both spotlight and shadow. By choosing to stay true musically, spiritually, emotionally, Valerie may have lost some commercial shine, but she gained something deeper: respect. The kind that doesn't come from awards or headlines, but from legacy. And even if the world wasn't shouting her name, everyone in the business knew when it came to pure, honest soul, Valerie Simpson was the real deal. By the late 1980s, things started to change, not just in the industry, but in life. The era of big hair, neon lights, and New Jack Swing was coming in strong, and the soulful storytelling that Ashford and Simpson built their name on began to fade from the charts. It wasn't that their music lost quality, far from it, it's that the world had shifted. Listeners wanted fast hits, not deep emotions. And for Valerie, that was a hard pill to swallow. She had built her life around authenticity, but now the business she loved was obsessed with image and instant fame. Labels wanted hooks, not heart. Valerie once said, "We used to write songs people lived with, now they just scroll through them." That hurt, man, because for her, music was sacred. Still, she and Nick kept pushing. They toured, they performed, they wrote for others, but the grind was taking a toll. Decades of non-stop creation, constant travel, and the pressure of staying relevant started to wear them down. Even though Valerie and Nick's marriage looked perfect from the outside, it wasn't without its storms. Imagine working, living, and loving the same person every single day. That takes strength most folks can't even imagine. They had creative disagreements, especially as they tried to balance evolving styles with staying true to their roots. Nick wanted to explore new production techniques, while Valerie clung to the warmth of live instruments. But even when they clashed, their foundation never cracked. They always came back to the piano, the place where it all began. That piano was therapy, their way of saying, "I still got you." The 1990 came with new challenges. The industry was now run by executives half their age, chasing trends they didn't believe in. Ashford and Simpson's sound was being called classic, which is just another way of saying outdated. When the market moves on, their record sales slowed, their TV appearances got fewer, but their integrity stayed untouched. Valerie, meanwhile, began focusing more on mentoring younger artists. She could have been bitter, but that's not her style. She found purpose in helping others find their sound. She told one student, "Don't chase what's hot, chase what's honest." That was Valerie through and through, but beneath the calm exterior, she was tired. The years of giving everything to the music had taken a quiet toll. She'd lost friends, bandmates, and even moments of her own peace to the grind. Yet she never complained. She carried it with grace, the same way she carried every song with love. By the turn of the millennium, Ashford and Simpson were legends, but legends don't get chart positions. The industry had moved on. Still, Valerie held her head high. She knew that while fame fades, truth doesn't. And though the spotlight dimmed, she never stopped shining where it mattered most inside the music. Then came the heartbreak that no song could prepare her for. In August 2011, Valerie Simpson lost her partner in music, her husband, her other half, Nick Ashford. For nearly 5 decades, they had written, sung, and lived side by side. When Nick passed away from throat cancer, it felt like the music itself went silent for a while. Valerie said it best. When you've been one half of something for so long, you don't quite know what to do with one. South. Their love wasn't just romantic, it was spiritual, creative, unbreakable. Every lyric they'd ever written about devotion suddenly became real in the most painful way. "You're all I need to get by" wasn't just a hit anymore, it was her truth. People wondered if she'd ever sing again. But Valerie, she did. She got back on stage alone this time, and sang through the tears. "I was singing for both of us," she said quietly. Her first solo performance after Nick's death was haunting. You could see the ache in her eyes, but her voice carried strength. It was as if she was holding him in every note, letting the world feel what love beyond life sounded like. Fans wept. Musicians stood in silence. That's the kind of raw honesty only someone like Valerie could give. In the months that followed, she poured her grief into work. She reopened their legendary New York club, Sugar Bar, a place they had built together years earlier as a safe space for artists to perform. It became her sanctuary, a way to keep Nick's energy alive. Every Thursday night, she'd be there, welcoming young talent, encouraging them, sometimes even jumping on the mic herself. "Nick loved this place," she told the crowd once, "so I keep it alive for him." That's resilience, man. She didn't run from the pain, she transformed it. Valerie turned mourning into mentorship, loss into legacy. She began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as a bridge between generations of soul music. Artists like Alicia Keys, John Legend, and Jennifer Hudson would come by Sugar Bar, calling her a queen, and Valerie would just smile humbly. She never saw herself as royalty, just someone blessed to share love through music. Even after all she'd been through, Valerie's spirit never grew bitter. "I had a beautiful ride," she said in one interview, "and I'm still on it." That's grace, the kind that comes from decades of faith, work, and love. Her story became proof that strength doesn't always roar, sometimes it just sings softly through the pain. Valerie Simpson lost her partner, but she never lost her purpose. The music still had meaning, the mission was still alive, and as long as she kept singing, Nick's heartbeat kept echoing in every song. Even after Nick's passing, Valerie Simpson kept the flame burning, not just for him, but for everything they stood for. The truth is, their music never really left, it just kept finding new life. Every generation rediscovers those songs, man. You can hear Ain't No Mountain High Enough blasting in commercials, movies, weddings, even on TikTok. That's how timeless their sound is. Younger artists started giving them their flowers, while Valerie was still here to receive them. Alicia Keys called her the blueprint. Beyoncé mentioned how Ashford and Simpson's songwriting showed her that love songs could have depth and power. And legends like Chaka Khan and Diana Ross still speak about how Valerie and Nick helped define their voices. Think about that. She shaped the soundtrack of multiple eras, quietly, humbly, with her hands on the piano and her heart in every lyric. But Valerie didn't stop with memories. She kept building. Sugar Bar, that small club on Manhattan's Upper West Side, became more than a venue, it became a monument. Every week, local singers, upcoming producers, and dreamers gather there to perform, to connect, to feel the same creative energy Valerie and Nick once shared. Valerie is often in the audience, clapping, nodding, sometimes walking up to the stage to share a word of advice. One young singer said, "She doesn't just listen, she sees you." That's her magic. She also started mentoring a new wave of female producers and songwriters. In a business that still sidelines women behind the board, Valerie's story became a beacon. She showed that you could be elegant, spiritual, and still be in total control of your art. "You can be soft," she told a group of young musicians, "and still be strong as steel." Over time, more and more recognition began to arrive. Inductions, tributes, awards, the world was finally catching up. But Valerie took it all with calm grace. When people praised her for keeping soul music alive, she smiled and said, "Soul music never died, it just waits for people to listen again." That line, pure Valerie. Through her mentorship, through Sugar Bar, through every artist she's inspired, Valerie's legacy keeps expanding. Her songs became more than just love stories. They turned into life lessons about faith, loyalty, and emotional honesty. And maybe that's the beauty of her journey. Even when the spotlight moved away, the light she created never faded. It just spread. Valerie Simpson didn't just leave a mark on music. She left a roadmap for what it means to live with love, lead with faith, and keep creating even when the world changes around you. When people talk about Valerie Simpson today, they don't just talk about her voice or her songs, they talk about her spirit. She's one of those rare artists whose presence feels like a sermon and a hug at the same time. The woman behind decades of music still carries herself with quiet grace, that same calm confidence she had back in the Bronx church choir. Valerie never saw fame as the goal. Her vision was always deeper, to make music that healed, that spoke truth, that reminded people love was still possible. "The world doesn't need more noise," she once said. "It needs melody." That's her philosophy in one line. Every chord she played, every lyric she wrote came from that same place of intention. Her faith has always been her anchor. She talks openly about prayer, about staying grounded, about trusting God through every season. And you can feel that spiritual foundation in her music, not religious, but soulful in the truest sense. When Valerie sings, it's like she's channeling something bigger than herself. That's why audiences connect. It's not performance, it's communion. She's also used her voice to uplift others beyond music. Valerie became an advocate for education, especially for young black girls who dream of entering the music business. She tells them, "Don't let them box you in. You can write, you can produce, you can run the show." And she means it because she lived it. Even now, she keeps evolving. In her 70 seconds, she released new solo material songs filled with wisdom and warmth, proof that creativity doesn't retire. Every line sounds like advice from someone who's walked through love, loss, and still found peace. "I'm still learning," she said in one interview. "That's the joy, you never stop growing." But perhaps Valerie's greatest message is in how she's carried herself through every chapter with humility, integrity, and kindness. She never needed scandals or headlines to stay relevant. She let her art speak for her. She let her character be her legacy. In a world obsessed with fame, Valerie Simpson reminds us that greatness isn't about how loud you are, it's about how true you stay. She represents the balance between power and softness, ambition and gratitude, spotlight and silence. And maybe that's her ultimate masterpiece, not just the song she wrote, but the life she lived. A life that says, stay grounded, love deeply, create honestly, and let your soul do the talking. She wrote the songs that made the world fall in love, and in the end, that's exactly what Valerie Simpson represents: love in motion. From the Bronx to Motown, from gospel choirs to global stages, she walked a path filled with melody, devotion, and grace. The world might remember the hits "Ain't No Mountain High Enough," "Solid," "You're All I Need to Get By," but behind every lyric was Valerie's heart, steady and true. When you really think about it, she never chased fame, she chased purpose. While others ran after trends, Valerie stayed rooted in faith and authenticity. She turned her pain into beauty, her loss into legacy. Even after losing Nick, she never let the music die, because in every note, his spirit and hers still dance together. And that's what makes her story so powerful. Valerie Simpson isn't just an underrated artist. She's a reminder that the truest greatness often hides in humility. She didn't need the spotlight to shine, she was the light. Today, young artists still sing her songs. Old fans still find comfort in her voice. And the love she poured into her music keeps rippling through generations. That's immortality. Man not in fame, but in feeling. So maybe the world did forget her name for a while. Maybe the headlines never shouted it loud enough. But her music, her soul never went silent. Do you think Valerie finally got the respect she deserved? Or maybe respect was never what she wanted in the first place. Maybe all she ever wanted was for the world to feel love the way she did. Because Valerie Simpson's voice may be quiet, but her message, it still sings louder than ever.